So President Donald Trump's longtime political ally, Roger Stone, is invoking the Fifth Amendment.
Earlier this week, through his lawyer, Stone declined to share documents and testimony with members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, pleading the Fifth against self-incrimination. Stone is under scrutiny by the special counsel, accused of knowing in advance about the WikiLeaks dump of Clinton campaign emails, a charge that he has vehemently denied. Stone is one of the several key players in the special counsel's investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Tuesday, Mueller filed a memo detailing former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn's cooperation with the investigation, recommending no prison time. And then Friday, Mueller is expected to file documents detailing why a plea agreement with Paul Manafort is being withdrawn. Documents on Michael Cohen, who is scheduled to be sentenced next week, are also expected.
Oh, boy.
That's a lot.
That is a lot coming up. On the Roger Stone thing, and I want
Yes.
to ask you about him because I know you have a special relationship.
We do have a special relationship.
Like the U.S. and the U.K. You have
That's
a special
right.
relationship with Roger Stone. First of all, you don't get to plead the Fifth on document production. Like, documents don't get to plead the Fifth.
Right.
Second of all, I seem to recall one Donald J. Trump saying that only the mob takes the Fifth.
That's right. I mean, you know, I mean, this doesn't look particularly good for Roger, but I talked to him about this, and I said, Roger, why are you doing this? It doesn't look particularly good for you. So what he is saying is that if he goes forward, tries to amend any testimony, things that he has forgotten in the past, that he's getting set up for a perjury trap, just like Jerome Corsi and like Scooter Libby over a decade before. So he's saying that it's better not to even put yourself in this oath environment in terms of document production, and that even though it may politically look bad for him, he's not going to give Mueller the chit in order to play against him so that he can lock him up.
Well, but so Jerome Corsi, who he was buddies with, and they were working together, and Corsi has come out and said that he and Roger Stone concocted a lie to tell to Congress.
Which Roger says is false. And there's no evidence of that, right? This is a total he said, she said situation. Corsi, I mean, here's what we know about Corsi. We know, and it's interesting.
He's an InfoWars.
Yes, he's InfoWars. He's a long time
of InfoWars, whatever that is.
long time birther. What Jerome Corsi has come out and said is that he forgot one of the emails that he sent, amended his testimony to Mueller, and that Mueller still indicted him for lying to the FBI, and is trying to get him to sign a sworn statement that he willingly lied to the FBI. And he's saying, I'm not going to be doing that.
Well, but okay, but there's a little more to it. Corsi is also saying that he had divine inspiration, that he just figured out in his own mind that Assange had the emails, that WikiLeaks was going to dump them, that the timing was going to be X, that it was Podesta's emails, that he just like had this on a flight divine moment of inspiration, and that Mueller was basically like, that's BS.
It sounds fantastical, but honest, I have reviewed what they say are their claims, and it kind of makes sense. So, for example, Roger is BCC'd on an email before all of this in July from James Rosen, the Fox News reporter who's no longer with them, in which he talks about how Clinton Foundation emails are coming from WikiLeaks. So he starts frequently sending all these frantic emails. He's like, something is coming. What's going on with Mueller? Then at the same time, you have the Panama Papers, which had been released around then. And what's interesting is that everybody had thought that Tony Podesta's, you know, John Podesta's brother's connections to the Russian government, which are basically the same thing that Paul Manafort did, is what would be coming out. That's the basis for Roger's tweet, where he says it will soon be the Podesta's time in the barrel. Now, look, it doesn't look good for him. I will be honest. Like, it does not look good for him. It does not look good for Jerome Corsi. But these guys are some shady people on K Street striking deals with the Russians and the Ukrainians in exactly the same vein as Paul Manafort.
And also, by the way, helping to get a president elected.
Yes, they were. But I mean, they weren't part of the Trump 2016 campaign.
But they were definitely involved. I mean, Stone was an advisor and an ally.
He got calls from Donald Trump. I mean, a lot of people get calls from Donald Trump.
You get calls from Donald Trump.
Yeah, he doesn't call me on the phone. I occasionally get called into his office, but yeah. So the basis of this is we have no idea what the actual motivation for what Roger is, but I see a plausible explanation for his
You're giving him the benefit of the doubt.
I am.
All right. I think we're going to learn some more here shortly, probably.
That's right.
All right. So the nation will say final goodbyes today to the late former President George H.W. Bush. Funeral services held for the 41st President of the United States yesterday at the Washington National Cathedral. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump attended, as well as former Presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter. Bush served the United States as a naval pilot, as a congressman, a UN ambassador, CIA director, special envoy to China, vice president, and finally, of course, commander-in-chief. Wednesday, he was remembered as a great leader, a family man, and a loyal friend.
The most decent and honorable person I ever met was my friend George Bush, one of nature's noble men. His epitaph, perhaps just a single letter, the letter L for loyalty. It coursed through his blood.
Your decency, sincerity, and kind soul will stay with us forever. So through our tears, let us know the blessings of knowing and loving you, a great and noble man, the best father a son or daughter could have. And in our grief, let us smile knowing that Dad is hugging Robin and holding Mom's hand again.
This morning, an intimate and private ceremony will be held for George H.W. Bush at St. Martin's Church in Houston, Texas. Bush's casket was brought to the church last night. After the private ceremony. He'll be buried at the Presidential Library beside his wife and daughter.
This was a beautiful ceremony yesterday. The moment there with his son, obviously incredibly human and moving. We're going to talk a little bit later about the dynamics between Trump and the rest of these folks. I will say, though, and this, George H.W. Bush, I think, seems like he was an incredibly honorable man, served the country from the time that he was able to, right? Signed up right at 18, became one of the youngest naval aviators. But this felt also like the morning of the passing of the old order.
Yeah, it did. I think you're absolutely right. And it was kind of the congeniality of the political system of that time. And it really was on full display. I actually went back and I found a photo from 2006 from the state funeral of Gerald Ford. It was almost all the same faces, absent George H.W. Bush.
Interesting.
And I was like, it's amazing how things change and how much they really do stay the same. And like you said, in terms of our political environment, this election, no matter what you side, it really was a break from that. And so it's kind of jarring to look back on that funeral and to see, the Colin Powells and the Condoleezza Rices and all those people of the world, and to see it really was a mourning of that time.
And I understand that, and there are parts of that I also have nostalgia for. But I don't, even though I obviously can't stand this president and think he's been destructive of the country, I don't mourn the passing of the old order, because the old order led to this situation where you've got a top crust that does really well, an elite class that's supposed to run things, and everybody else getting screwed. And so while I'm very distressed by the manifestation of the new order of the moment, we did need to move on to something new.
I think that's absolutely right. One of the issues is that it really is the embedded cosmopolitan elite class in D.C. and New York, which does mourn this order because they are the ones.
Good for them.
Yes, those leaders are the ones who created it. Whether it's NAFTA, whether it's our current immigration system. Right. I mean, you had all of these people lined up who contributed to exactly the conditions that led to this massive populist explosion in 2016. And so, I mean, we shouldn't sit here and criticize the man as he's being laid to rest. But it is an interesting point that these men do represent something much larger than themselves, and that old order is now passing. And that's part of why I love that photo of President Trump just sitting next to his predecessors, and they just really could not be more different. But it's good that we have some institutions and ceremonies which do bring it all together and remind us of what stitches everything, stitches history.
I think that's very well said.
Yeah.
Coming up on Rising, after global carbon emissions levels remained flat for years, really, the world hoped that we had finally made some progress reducing emissions.
But in 2018, CO2 are expected to reach its highest levels yet, showing more evidence of the growing divide between international aspirations for combating climate change and what's actually being done. More on the newest report next on Rising.